Hey guys, it's Bella and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having an incredible day today. We are going to be covering a Mystery Monday case in today's video, but before we get into it, I do just want to thank Audible for sponsoring today's video. I love Audible. I've been talking about them for so long now, and it's just the best thing to like pop on an audiobook when I'm driving to my parents' house. They live like 35 minutes away, so it's just the perfect time. And also when I'm just cleaning the house, like it's so good to just have on in the background. They have one of my favorite books of all time on there. It's called Private Peaceful by Michael McCarty. You guys have heard me talk about it a million times, but I absolutely love that book. It is so good. I'm currently listening to The Silent Patient, and I'm not that far through, so please don't spoil it, but so far, so good. I'm so excited. I've had so many recommendations for it, and also like after this one, I back books up too far in advance, but I really want to listen to Where the Crawdads Lie next because I've had so many recommendations. Both of the books, Where the Crawdads Lie and the one I'm listening to at the moment, The Silent Patient, they're like crime, thriller, suspenseful books, so I'm like really excited about them. So if you guys haven't heard of Audible, they are the leading providers of spoken entertainment and audiobooks. And if you remember, every month you get 1 credit to pick a free title as well as 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, as well as daily news and guided meditations. They also do really easy audiobook exchanges, and they give you like an audiobook library. So even if you do decide to cancel your subscription, the books in your audiobook library will be there forever. So if you guys are interested in Audible at all, make sure you go to www.audible.com/BellaFiore, or you can text Bella Fiore to 500 500. You'll get an exclusive 30-day free trial as well as 1 free book and 2 free Audible originals completely free. So make sure you guys check it out. I'll leave all of the information in the description as well as that link. And make sure you check out Private Peaceful. I promise you won't regret it. It is my favorite book of all time. It's like my baby. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into today's case. Also, sorry for my nasally voice. I'm really sick and my nose is like completely blocked at the moment. It's not a vibe. So today we're going to be talking about the case of Rayna Rison, and honestly, strap yourselves in guys, because this one is a total roller coaster. Rayna was born on the 6th of May in 1976 to Ben and Karen Rison in LaPorte County in Indiana, which is a pretty small city. It's about 70 miles southeast of Chicago, and in terms of population, they really haven't had a lot of growth since like the 1950s. Like literally since the 1950s, they've had a population of around 20,000 people. It's pretty much your typical Midwestern town, lots of mom and pop stores, cafes, bars, tree-lined streets, and it was a pretty quiet, safe place to live with like a really low violent crime rate and an even lower homicide rate. I mean, there was next to no homicides in 100 years, like literally since serial killer Belle Gunness in 1908. So it must have been pretty boring to be a police officer there. Not that that's a bad thing. In 1993 particularly, there was 25,000 reported murders in the whole of the US, and only 1 of those occurred in LaPorte County. So anyway, in 1993, Rayna was a sophomore at LaPorte High School. She got good grades, she played 3 instruments, she played the clarinet, the flute, the oboe. She was also a part of the school marching band. She worked 3 part-time jobs on top of that, one of which was at the local Pine Lake Animal Hospital, where she cleaned kennels, she fed and walked the animals, and she loved it. It was like her favorite thing because she really wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. So it was like her dream job, especially as far as part-time jobs go. On Friday the 26th of March in 1993, Rayna was 16 years old at the time. She just had, a typical day at high school. She was headed home to get changed before her shift at the animal hospital, which everyone back then just called the clinic. And she had a 4 to 6 p.m. shift, and then after that, her and her boyfriend Matt Elsa were going to go out to get dinner, which she was really excited for. Her and Matt had kind of been on and off since the 6th grade. And I mean like really on and off, like, when they were off, she'd kind of dated some other boys in between. And he was also a sophomore at LaPorte High School. He just was a really like the family loved him. He was just that kind of guy. And they had recently like broken up and gotten back together again, so she was really excited to be going on this date with him. So anyway, she hopped into some blue jeans, some black shoes, a sweatshirt, and she also took a black leather Letterman jacket, which was Matt's, so it had Elsa like embroidered across the shoulders at the back. She just like took it everywhere. It was a symbol, like when he gave it to her, it was like a symbol of them being together. It's like such a high school thing, isn't it? And she headed to work at 4 p.m. and she drove her tan Ford LTD there. She just parked in the car parking lot of the clinic. At around 7 p.m, Matt showed up to her house to pick her up, but she wasn't there. And Ben answered the door and he was like, you know, she's not here, but you're welcome to come in and wait inside, which he did. And some time passed, she still wasn't there, so Matt decided to call the clinic and there was no answer, so he decided to go and drive and have a look, see what was, you know, going on. And her car was gone, all of the lights to the clinic were off, and it was locked up. So he headed back to her parents' house and, you know, they waited some more, and he, Ben, Karen all started to get a little worried because it was very unlike her to just change her plans without telling anyone, and she'd been excited for this date all week, so it was very out of the ordinary. Ben then decided to call her older sister Laurie. Laurie was about 10 years older than her and her husband Ray McCarty lived on the other side of town, and sometimes Rayna would spend some time with them, so he decided to call them. They hadn't heard from her, hadn't seen her, nothing. So then Wendy got home. Wendy is her younger sister, and she'd been out at the movies. She got home at around 10 p.m, and immediately she got home, she just knew something was up. It was very tense, and so her and Ben decided to go to the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office to file a missing persons report. And they got there, and the police basically said, look, it's not unusual for 16-year-olds to change their plans and not tell anybody. There's not a lot we can do, but feel free to come back after it's been 24 hours and then you can file a missing persons report. So they headed back home, and then the next morning, still no sign of her. Her car wasn't there. She hadn't been home. Her bed was completely unslept in, which I always think about that in these cases. If I went missing, you would not be able to tell by my bed, because I do not make my bed every morning. I tried to make it a habit at one time, but that lasted probably about 2 weeks, and then I just got bored, and now I don't make my bed every day. So truly, if I went missing, you would not be able to say, like, her bed was unslept in, because my bed always looks slept in. Should I start making my bed in case I go missing? Anyway, that morning, they didn't know what to do. So Ben and Wendy, they just started calling everyone and anybody that they knew that could help, and they got a whole search party. Friends, family, her marching band, friends, all started looking for her. They were all carpooling together to go out and search all around LaPorte. They started handing out flyers. They printed up a bunch of flyers, handing them out to local businesses and stuff like that. And at that point, the police saw just how many people were out searching for her, and they decided, you know, shit, we really need to get involved and do our jobs. So the police decided to make a public appeal asking for any information as to her whereabouts, if anyone had seen her on the day of her disappearance, and this generated 2 leads from 2 completely separate people who called in separately but both had the same story. They said that they saw a car in the parking lot of the clinic. There was 2 men in the front seats of the parking lot, and there was a girl who matched Rayna's description standing outside of the car, and she seemed to be having what they described as a lover's quarrel with one of the men in the car. And this was at around 6 p.m. So logically, the police thought, Matt. You know, he said as much. He said he'd gone down to check on her, so they brought him in for questioning, and he told them, you know, he went down there, but there was no sign of her. Her car wasn't there, all the lights were off, the place looked locked up, and of course they had no reason to doubt his story. And then the very next day, they got a call with a tip from somebody saying they had seen a tan Ford LTD parked on the side of a secluded road 9 miles northeast of the animal hospital on County Road 200. I forgot to wear earrings. There are 3 things that truly make up a Bella Fiore Mystery Monday. Some funky earrings. These ones are from Hungry Lala, my absolute favourite. A band tee, or a vintage tee, an oversized tee, and me mispronouncing words. So Timothy Short from the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office was dispatched to go and have a look at the car. He got there, he ran the number plate and confirmed that it was Rayna's car. And the car itself was found on the side of the road. It was completely unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. One of the doors was open, and the purse, her purse, was found on the passenger seat, and the hood of the car was popped. So naturally it looked like maybe she'd broken down or was just having some car troubles. The glove box was open and the contents from it was strewn all over the passenger side floor. There was a broken hair clip that was found outside the driver's side door. I mean, the whole car definitely raised a few questions in itself. There was a few scenarios going through police's minds, like did she break down, someone offered to help her and then abducted her, or did she stop, had a look under her car, a car passing by hit her, they didn't know what to do and they took her body with them. The purse was definitely a cause for concern because if somebody had stopped to help her and she'd gone with them willingly, or she'd walked into town to find some help, she would have brought her purse with her. Like, it just makes no sense to leave the car unlocked and the keys in the ignition and, you know, her purse just sitting right there on the passenger seat. So it was definitely looking like something a little more sinister had happened. And it just got worse when police checked under the hood. There was nothing wrong, so they decided to turn on the ignition. The car started up fine. So they got a mechanic out to check, and the mechanic confirmed there was nothing wrong with the car. So it was looking a lot like it had been staged to look like a breakdown when the car was actually fine. But there was no signs of a struggle, there was no broken glass, nothing like that. There was no DNA on the car. They searched the surrounding area, they found absolutely nothing. Her parents were also confused by the location of the car itself because it was on like an indirect route home, and it's definitely not a route that she would normally take, especially on a night like that night, the 26th, because it was a foggy night. So there's no reason for her to be taking these back streets, taking an indirect route, especially when she had a date to get to. So it was just like an unusual placement of the car as well. They had evidence technician Larry Mitchell come out and have a look, and again, nothing, no DNA, no blood, no physical evidence, and especially nothing that led them or pointed towards any sort of foul play. He did notice that on the floor of the passenger seat though, there was some like wet foliage and wet newspapers, as if somebody had put a wet towel on top of it, which he thought was weird because like there was no moisture that night, it hadn't been raining, and in the glove box of the car they found a school signet ring, which originally they believed was Matt's, but when they went and questioned him about it, he said it couldn't have been his because his had his name engraved on it. So he suggested that maybe it belonged to a man named Jason Tibbs, and Jason was somebody that Rayna had dated in grade 6 for 6 months, and they'd remained friends ever since, despite the fact that Matt didn't like him, my family didn't like him, my friends didn't really like him. He dropped out of high school, he had a criminal record, and he was still in love with her. Like, he would write her love letters all the time. He would always try and convince her to get back with him and to leave Matt. But yeah, they remained friends despite all of this. She would often get him to come and visit her at the clinic to keep her company, but she was always knocking him back. She was perfectly happy with Matt and just wanted to remain friends with Jason. And Matt, while he didn't like him, was pretty confident in him and Rayna's relationship. He didn't think he had anything to worry about, but he didn't know how the ring got in the glove box, which made him think that maybe something was going on that he didn't know about. So police obviously tracked Jason down to ask him why the ring was in the car, ask him a few questions, and he just said that one day she was having some radio troubles. She asked him to help her out, and as he was having a look at the radio, the ring was just getting in the way. So he put it in the glove box so it wouldn't get lost. It was in a safe spot, he knew where it was, and that was it. That was the whole story. And Jason was also one of the first people who was out searching. He was driving around with one of her bandmates around all the county roads looking for her the day after she disappeared. But obviously police still had to ask what he was doing the night of her disappearance, and he had a super tight alibi. Jason told detectives that from about 6 p.m. till about 9 or 9:30 p.m. he'd been at a mobile home park on Fowler Road. He'd been tutoring 2 younger girls, Jamie and Misty, in maths and science, and then at around 9:30 p.m. his friend Chad came and picked him up and took him to play a game of fox hunting with a bunch of the other kids in the town. And if you guys haven't heard of fox hunting, it actually sounds so fun. It's like a massive game of of hide and seek using cars, and the fox drives to an undisclosed location, and then everybody has these like radios or walkie-talkies or whatever, and every few minutes the fox will come on and give a hint or a clue about where they are, and then everyone else has to try and find the fox. And he was playing that till about midnight, and then his friend Scott picked him up, took him to another friend's house where they watched TV and played darts until about 3 a.m, which is when he headed home where his parents were waiting for him, and went to bed. And Jamie and Misty both corroborated that he was tutoring them. His friend Chad corroborated that he picked him up. Originally, Chad said, I didn't pick him up, and then he changed his story saying I actually did pick him up. Police didn't look too much into this because all of his other alibis checked out, and kids are kind of unreliable, and they just thought maybe Chad was worried he was getting implicated in Rayna's disappearance, and so he kind of freaked out and said he didn't, and then was like, actually I did. The kids at the fox hunting game also said that he was playing the game, and his friend Scott corroborated that he was there after that as well. So he had a tight alibi. I mean, obviously there were a few issues with the alibi. I mean, why was a high school dropout with a criminal conviction tutoring 2 younger girls in maths and science? Although apparently maths and science were like his strong points before he dropped out of school, I don't know. And also Fail Road is really close to where her car was found, Rayna's car was found. Anyway, police moved on. They decided to question the girl that Rayna was working with at the clinic that night, a girl named Cheryl. And Cheryl said that she actually ended up leaving early that night because she wasn't feeling very well. So Rayna was left there by herself after Cheryl had left. And police then also ended up receiving another call from an eyewitness who said that they saw a car in the parking lot of the clinic at around 6 p.m, that there again was 2 men in the car and a girl matching Rayna's description, and it seemed like the girl was having a fight with one of the men in the car. So police were trying to find these men. Who were they? Who was she arguing with? Did they hurt her? Did they follow her? Did she know them at all? They tried entertaining the idea that maybe it was Matt and Jason, but they weren't friends. So it wouldn't make sense for them to be in the same car together at the clinic or in the same car together at all. Police also had Matt, Jason, and a third undisclosed person take polygraph tests. Both Matt and Jason passed these polygraph tests, and the third person had shown some signs of deception in their polygraph tests, but police weren't releasing the name of this third person. 6 days had passed, there had been no new leads. Police decided to make another public appeal for any information, also to update the public on the case. They had Police Chief Gene Samuelson and Police Captain John Miller make a statement. They confirmed that there was no real updates, and told the public that there was a reward at this point. The family had managed to raise $1,000, and then an anonymous donor had donated $5,000, so there was a $6,000 reward pool for any information leading to finding Rayna. By this point, the Indiana State Police had gotten involved. They brought a helicopter in to help aid in the search. The FBI had been briefed on what was going on, and America's Most Wanted had aired a segment on Rayna's disappearance, which actually led to a new lead. An anonymous caller led police to Fail Road, which was a county road about 6 miles south of where Rayna's car was found. And when officers arrived, they found a black leather jacket hanging on a tree about 20 feet from the road. The jacket had the name Elsa across the shoulders, as in Matt Elsa, Rayna's boyfriend, and it looked like it'd been thrown from a passing car just by the way that it was hanging. The area the jacket was found in had actually already been searched by state troopers literally the day before, who confirmed that it was not there the day before, so it had only been placed there either that night or that morning that the call had come in. Police then decided to have another press conference where they told the public about the developments. They also told them about the reward pool going up. A local bakery had added another $5,000 to the reward pool, and Charlie Finley, who was the former owner of the Oakland Athletics baseball team, had added like $25,000 to the reward pool, bringing it up to a total of $36,000 for any information leading to Rayna's whereabouts. A month went by and there were no new leads. Her parents still searched every single day for her. They left their porch light on every single night. in case she came home. America's Most Wanted aired a second segment on her, but there was no new developments until the 27th of April 1993. So on the 27th, a man and his 14-year-old daughter Tracy decided to go fishing at a local pond just off Range Road, about 2 miles out of La Porte. And at around 4:30 p.m, Tracy got a little bored. She decided to go for a little wander, explore the pond, which is when she saw what she thought was a turtle. So she got closer to have a look at the turtle, and turns out it was actually, I mean, how traumatic, thinking you're going up to look at a turtle and finding out this turtle is actually a shoe which is attached to a fully clothed, decomposing body with 2 logs on the back. And she ran back to her dad, who called 911, waited there for them to arrive, and 2 members of the dive team came. They collected the body, put it on a stretcher. The body was that of a woman who was wearing similar clothes to those that Rayna was described to have been wearing. And on the left hand of the body, they also found 2 rings. One which was engraved with the name Matt Elsa, and the other which was engraved with the name Rayna Rison. So immediately they thought it was Rayna, but obviously they pulled dental records and waited for the autopsy to confirm that it was in fact her. And it was confirmed that it was Rayna. The autopsy also confirmed that she died due to asphyxiation, so she was strangled with somebody's bare hands. She also didn't have any, injuries, bruises, anything like that, but they did think that she had been hit with some sort of blunt force trauma and was possibly unconscious when she was strangled to death. And I mean, strangulation is a very intimate way to kill someone. You have to be there looking at them, strangling them for however many minutes, watching the life go out of their eyes. Like, that is a crime of passion. So of course her death was ruled a homicide, and the case was changed from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation. Everyone was shocked. I mean, especially with such like a low homicide rate, this was a massive thing, and everyone was talking about it. Nobody could understand who would do something like this, or who would do something like this to Rayna as well. She was well liked and she knew what she wanted, and that's what she was focused on. She was really paving the way to do what she wanted to do with her life. Her parents, of course, were absolutely devastated. They held a funeral for her on the 1st of May at the Rolling Prairie United Methodist Church, and hundreds of people attended in support. The police were also there, and they were looking out to see if anyone was acting like a little bit sketchy, a little bit sus, because they believed it had to have been somebody she knew, or it had to have been somebody close to her who did this. And they really believed that she had gone willingly to where her car was located. 6 weeks after Rayna's disappearance, police got a tip about Ray McCarty. And if you remember, Ray is Rayna's older sister Lori's husband. And he was actually the 3rd person, the undisclosed person, that also took a polygraph test that Jason and Matt took, and his was the one that showed signs of deception. And he wasn't being named by police, but he was definitely someone they were looking into, because he was, for lack of a better term, a piece of shit, really. Ray was actually on probation at the time of Rayna's disappearance, and it was literally just about to finish, like a week or a few days after her disappearance. And the reason that he was on probation is the reason police were looking into him, because when Rayna was 11 and he was 24 and married to her older sister Lori, he began sexually molesting her, which lasted for 2 years until he impregnated her when she was 13 years old. She had to go to a clinic to get the pregnancy terminated, and he was listed as the father, and apparently on the report he threatened her and her family and said, if you tell the police, I will kill Rayna. So he ended up pleading guilty to a Class D felony of child molestation. He received a 3-year suspended sentence and had to complete counseling, and that was it. Like, that blows my mind that you can molest a child for 2 years, literally impregnate her, and you don't even get jail time. That's what the fuck. And he didn't even end up completing the counseling sessions that he was meant to. And get this, Laurie stayed married to him, and they stayed living together on the other side of town and were working on their marriage. And Rayna's family, as in her parents, forgave him. What the fuck? It just blows my mind. This gets me so heated. This part of the case got me so heated. She just had some horrible people in her life. She had to constantly be around the person who molested her for 2 years. Imagine your parents forgiving. I don't know about you, but I feel incredibly sorry for Rayna. It's just appalling, honestly. Appalling. So originally, when Rayna first disappeared, of course they were, questioning everyone in the family, people close to her, to find out what could have happened. They questioned Ray and Laurie, and both of them said that neither of them had seen her that night. And then Ray's story changed. He said that he was in South Bend, which is like a neighboring city, at a pig farm collecting some money. The location that Rayna was found was actually more or less along this route. But again, when he changed his story to the pig farm, South Bend story, her body still had not been found. This was beforehand. So then when her body was found, police were very sus on him. On the 7th of May, a search warrant was issued for Ray and Laurie's house. Both of their cars were impounded for forensic testing. And in the house, they found a .44 Magnum revolver. They found 2 guns, and they found a taser in the house, a stun gun. And then on the 11th of May, while forensic tests were still being carried out and they hadn't got results back yet, Ray walked into the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office voluntarily and changed his alibi again, a 3rd time, and said that he actually had seen Rayna on the night of her disappearance on the 26th of March. He said that around 5:40 or 5:45 p.m. he was looking at a house that was for sale on Warren Street, which was later confirmed by another witness. And apparently at this house at Warren Street, he could see the clinic, he could see that her car was in the parking lot, and so he decided to go and talk to her. Poor Rayna, having to deal with your abuser wanting to come and just chat to you. So he goes in, she's sweeping or mopping the foyer, and he goes, "Do you know where Laurie is?" And she goes, "No, you need to get out because I'm about to leave and go on a date." And so apparently he just left. That was the end of it. The conversation lasted half a minute. And he claims that the reason he didn't want to tell police this was because later that night he actually picked up a female hitchhiker, and instead of going home, he dropped her off at state lines and then stayed at a motel, and he didn't want Laurie to find out because they still had trust issues from when he literally molested her sister. In a police interview with Laurie, she stated that apparently after Rayna's disappearance, Ray asked her to vacuum the back of his car, but she later recanted that statement. And then when lab reports came back, they found nothing. There was a bit of animal blood in the back. It was deer blood because he was a hunter, but that was it. That was all they found. There was nothing, no evidence leading to Rayna. So while Ray was considered a person of interest, there was just nothing tying him to the case or to the murder whatsoever, and the case just started to go cold. Over a year went by with no new leads until November of 1994, when Indiana State Police pulled over a van which was driven by a man named Larry Hall, who they arrested for attempted kidnapping. So Larry Hall had been or was being monitored by numerous jurisdictions. He was known to travel all over the Midwest for different Civil War reenactments, and police wanted to question him in relation to 2 attempted abductions in Georgetown, Illinois. And the young girls that he had attempted to abduct had given them a license plate number which was registered to Larry Hall, which is why he was stopped by police in Grant County. Police also had concerns that he was involved in the murder of a girl from Illinois called Jessica Roach, whose body had been found across state lines in Indiana. So, as I said, they arrested him. They searched the back of his van and they found a bunch of newspaper clippings about young women who had been murdered or were missing, some of which are about Rayna Rison, and they also found a prescription pill bottle, a prescription birth control pill bottle, where the label was made out to R. Rison. So of course police questioned him on this, and he confessed that yes, he had murdered Rayna Rison, and he also said that he had killed so many women that he couldn't even keep track of it and couldn't tell one victim from the other victim. but then he recanted, and this happened a few times, and he would confess again and recant and then confess, and then he just ended up recanting completely. Bit of a nut job, if you ask me. But police did have him on the attempted kidnapping charges, so he was detained, so they did have time to try and connect him to other murders such as Jessica Roach and Rayna Rison. There had been a bunch of cases around the Midwest of missing girls and young women, and they all seemed to tie in with his locations when he was traveling around for different Civil War reenactments. And his location just seemed to tie into a lot of different cases. And then tracing the Civil War reenactments, they managed to kind of put together a comprehensive picture of his whereabouts and his habits, but they just could not pin him in LaPorte on the 26th of March in 1993, no matter how they looked at it. He wasn't there. Rayna definitely fit his victim type, but she wasn't sexually abused or sexually mutilated like his other victims were. So police checked all the pharmacies in the greater area, none of whom could confirm this prescription because Rayna did not have a birth control prescription. He had actually made it himself, and he had these newspaper clippings of her so that he could fantasize that he was the one who murdered her, even though he didn't. What a freak. And he ended up confessing to the murder of Jessica Roach and the murder and abduction of 3 other women, so 4 in total. And then in June of 1995, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for these 4 murders and abductions, although it is speculated or believed that he killed up to 30 to 40 women, including Tammy Zawicki and the Springfield 3. So with that, police were basically back to square one, and they were back to trying to build a case against Ray McCarty, who was their prime suspect. Finally, 5 years after Rayna's murder, they felt that they had enough evidence to present to a grand jury. After the grand jury reviewed all of the evidence, all of the witness testimony, they voted to indict him, and so he was formally arrested and charged with the murder of Rayna Rison, to which he pled guilty and so was placed in jail for 15 months awaiting his trial. And then at this time, LaPorte got a new prosecutor, Robert Beckman, who decided there actually was not enough evidence to indict him, and so in 1999 he was released, and Rayna's family fully stood behind this, saying there's no way he did it. They totally believed he was innocent. Like, this man molested your daughter. Like, what is going on? Once Ray was released, the case went cold for 15 years. It wasn't until May of 2008 that police finally got a new lead. It was from a guy named Ricky Hammonds who called them up. He was an inmate at the Indiana Correctional Facility, and he was in there for another unrelated murder. But he said that he had some information that he'd never spoken about before, that he just needed to get it off his chest, that he didn't want anything in return, no deals, nothing. He just wanted to tell them because he'd been getting really close to his niece, spending a lot of time with her, and if anything were to happen to her, he would hope that anyone with information would come forward. So he just wanted to do this because he felt it was the right thing to do. So Detective Al Williamson of the Indiana State Police and Detective Brett Airy of the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office went down to interview Ricky Hammonds. He said that he was 14 at the time of the murder, and he was living with his parents on his parents' farm with his sister Jennifer and his sister's boyfriend Eric. And he said on the 26th of March, he had snuck out of his parents' house, snuck into the barn on their property, and into the rafters, hidden so that he could smoke a joint without being caught. And while he was in there, his sister's silver Buick car backed into the barn with the rear, like the boot facing where he was, but he was like pretty hidden up in the rafters. And 2 guys got out of the car, his sister's boyfriend Eric and Eric's friend Jason Tibbs. And apparently they were arguing, and Eric said like something to Jason like, what the hell happened? And then they came round to the boot of the car, opened the boot, and there was a girl who was facing up. He said she wasn't moving and she looked really like pale. He didn't know who the girl was. He said she was partially covered by like a dark jacket or a blanket. Apparently then, Jason said to Eric, I know what to do with her. They closed the boot, they got in the car, and they drove away. And they never knew that Ricky was there. Ricky never confronted them about it because they were older than him. He was scared that they would murder him too. So he never told anyone about what he saw. So police then tracked down Eric Freeman, and he was in South Carolina. So Detective Williamson and Detective Airy went down to talk to him. And they knocked on his door, said, can we ask you a couple of questions? And he came outside, he was curious. And then as soon as they mentioned Rayna's name, he completely closed up and refused to answer any questions. Now, obviously all they had at this point was the word of a convicted killer. So they're notoriously unreliable, and they didn't have enough for an arrest, and they would need something more. They would need evidence, or they would need a confession. I mean, obviously they thought they would have a better time getting a confession out of Eric, because from what Ricky had said, he wasn't like directly involved in the murder. He didn't know it was going to happen. He was just there when it happened, and he was arguing with Jason about it. So they thought maybe they would have a better time getting a confession out of him, especially if immunity was on the table. So they brought him in, they put immunity out on the table, and he was just closed off. He would not say anything. He actually even refused to acknowledge he knew who Rayna was at all, had even heard her name, which, like, if you lived in La Porte or near La Porte at the time, you would know who Rayna was, because, as I said, extremely low homicide rate. So it was the talk of the town. Everybody knew about it. Now, after several months of pressure, Eric did agree to give a statement if he had immunity. The problem was the state didn't want to give immunity out just like that, considering the roller coaster that this whole case had been with Larry, with Jason, so many different suspects that turned out not to be suspects or that they couldn't arrest. They didn't want to just throw it out. I mean, I guess it is a pretty big leap to give someone full immunity based on the testimony of a convicted killer, especially when that is the only evidence they have whatsoever. So finally, after the state deliberating for 5 years on whether or not to give Eric immunity, they decided that they were going to give him immunity for his statement. And so in July of 2013, 20 years after Rayna's murder, Eric gave his statement, and he started off by confirming that what Ricky had said was true. And he said that on the afternoon of the 26th of March that Jason called him up and asked if he could give him a lift to the clinic because he wanted to talk to Rayna, and Jason had introduced Rayna to Eric as his girlfriend, and Jason said that he just wanted to sort something out with her. So Eric agreed. He drove Jason to the clinic, and Jason went in there. He was in there for all of a minute or two before him and Rayna both came out. And they were arguing, and Jason was telling her that he wanted to be with her, and she was shooting him down. And Jason said, Rayna, can you just get in the car? I'll get Eric to drive us somewhere just so we can talk. So after he begged her for a little while to get in the car, she eventually got in the car. Eric drove them around while Jason again was just begging her, break up with Matt, you should be with me. And she kept shooting him down. And then eventually either Jason or Rayna, he doesn't remember who, asked him to stop while they were on Fowle Road. And so he stopped, and Jason and Rayna got out of the car. They went to the rear of the car, and they were arguing, of course, some more. And she just told him, like, she just didn't want to be with him. And they argued some more. Eventually, Eric got out of the car to tell them that he wanted to go. But when he got out, he saw Jason punch Rayna in the face and then get on top of her and started choking her with his hands. And he said, stop, like, you're going to kill her. And then Jason just looked up at her and said, too late. And then he popped the trunk of the car. He put Rayna's body in the trunk of the car. And they drove back to Eric's girlfriend's house where he was living, which is when they went into the barn where he did not know Ricky was at the time. They kept arguing, and apparently Jason said, if I can't have her, nobody can. They didn't stay at the barn for very long. They left shortly after. They headed to the clinic where Jason got into Rayna's car, drove that away, and Eric followed him, still with Rayna's body in the boot. and they headed to Range Road, which, if you remember, is where the father and the daughter discovered her body in that pond. So the two boys lifted her out of the trunk, took her over into the pond, but she kept floating. So Jason ended up putting logs over her to weigh her down, and then they went their separate ways, assuming that's when Jason went and staged her car as if it had broken down. And Eric went home, back to his girlfriend's family's home. That's when he realized later that night that he still had the Letterman jacket in his car. So he called Jason. Jason came by, grabbed the jacket, and left. And that jacket was Matt's jacket that was later found in that tree. So on the 23rd of August in 2013, 20 years after Rayna's disappearance, police went and arrested Jason Tibbs. He still lived in the same house that he did back 20 years earlier, although now he was 39 years old and had a wife and 2 children. They had a pre-trial hearing where they basically discredited his entire alibi. The 2 girls who said that he was tutoring them actually said that he wasn't tutoring them at all. Chad, who he said had picked him up and taken him to fox hunting, said that Jason had told him to say that and that he actually hadn't picked Jason up that night. The people who said that he was involved in the game of fox hunting said they never actually saw him, they just heard his voice on the radio. So his whole alibi was just completely discredited. The defense, obviously trying to paint reasonable doubt, basically just tried to paint Ray McCarty as the killer. Although the prosecution did seek to exclude his grand jury indictment, his changing alibi, his threats towards Rayna, and the judge did rule that his grand jury indictment could be excluded. All of the evidence against Ray could be excluded besides his sexual assaults against Rayna and his threats towards her. The trial came to an end on the 7th of November in 2014, and the jury deliberated for 5 hours before coming back with a guilty verdict. On the 19th of December, Jason Tibbs was then sentenced to 40 years in prison with a minimum 20-year sentence, so he will be eligible for parole in 2034. Of course, Jason's attorney, Scott King, was trying to get the conviction overturned. He had a few points. He said, one, that the prosecution actually had a deal with Ricky Hammonds that they didn't disclose in return for his testimony. He said Eric's statement was coerced and that they didn't actually hear the full or see the full transcript of Eric's statement, that there may have been some, leading questions or suggested answers that Detectives Airy and Williamson had cut from the transcript. His defense also tried to argue that his defense at the time of his trial did not or mistakenly forgot to include some analysis from the FBI, and apparently this analysis shows that there were trace amounts in Rayna's hair of fibers from carpeting in the trunk of one of Ray McCarty's vehicles, which is how could you forget that, is my question. How could you forget to include evidence like that? And as far as I'm aware, I read the entire transcript of the appeal, and the post-convictions court denied the appeal on the 30th of July last year in 2019. Since this time, the Rison family has started a memorial fund. It's called the Rayna Rison Memorial Scholarship Fund, and each year they give one band student a scholarship. Also, in February of 2018, Ray McCarty was arrested under preliminary charges of felony battery resulting in serious bodily injury. Although he died or was found dead in his cell at the age of 52 at St. Joseph's County Jail. And he was found by a correctional officer in one of his routine rounds. And there's actually now a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of Ray McCarty because he was on 5 prescription medications for antidepressants, serious back injuries, and blood pressure. And apparently the jail staff knew about this. They knew he was at severe risk of withdrawal syndrome of symptoms but they did not provide him with any of his medication. So that is everything. That's the entire case. I would love to hear your thoughts on the case, and hopefully I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.